afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name is Whitney. I know most of you, I think. I am a member here, but I'm also a dietitian, and I work primarily with athletes and active duty military, so performance nutrition is really my primary area of expertise as a dietitian. I know some of you came to this presentation last time, so hopefully you get even more out of it this second time, and we'll get it recorded for reals this time around, so then next time we can do a different topic and you can come again, right? But if you were here last time and you want me to expand on anything that we addressed or follow up with anything, please feel free to ask any questions. This will be really relaxed, informal, so you don't have to wait until the end to ask any questions of me. And then we'll kind of just see what else, other topics and areas that people want to discuss as we go through. So everyone should have a sheet of paper. So flip it over, just make like 1 day's worth of meals. Maybe it's what you ate yesterday or today. Maybe it's what you're planning on having tomorrow. Maybe it's just what you would like to have if you had the time to plan it and sit down and make it. So whatever you feel like, there's no right or wrong. It's just to kind of get everybody thinking about nutrition and food and whatnot. So just 1 day's worth of meals and snacks. So kind of think about if you need pre, post workout, between meals, snacks, those kinds of things. So yeah, take a minute or two, and then we'll regroup. And that's okay. Who is brave enough to share their 1 day meal plan?
Meal plan or what we ate?
Or what you ate, log. Go ahead.
I had coffee, and then an omelet with just cheese, bacon, and veggies, like bell peppers, onions, tomatoes.
Oops, if I could spell. You said cheese,
Yeah.
bacon, onions, bell peppers.
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
That's breakfast.
Okay.
For lunch, I had a sandwich made of sourdough, roast beef, blue cheese, and horseradish.
You said blue cheese and horseradish. Okay.
And then for dinner, I had rice, or Mexican rice, beans, just like, I guess, boiled beans,
Okay.
and chicken soup. That had carrots, chicken, squash, and potato. And a 6-pack of Modelo's.
And what? I'm sorry.
I'm just joking.
I seriously didn't hear you, but.
I said a 6-pack of Modelo's.
Oh. All right. No. Anything else? Any snacks?
Monday. No. No, that's it.
All right, that's it. Okay. We'll kind of hold that. Anybody else want to share theirs? No? Okay. But we will look back at these as we go through performance nutrition principles that I'll be speaking to today. So I like to keep things really simple. I feel like 3 is kind of the maximum amount of things that you can really retain at one time. So since they're not up there, we're going to go through each of them individually. But fuel, recover, and protect are the 3 main concepts that we're going to go over today. So just kind of real quick, fuel is going to be kind of all the things that you're putting into your body to fuel it for all the things, the demands that you place on it each day. Recover is going to be how are you taking care of your body after you do activity or at the end of the day, kind of that 24-hour process. And then protect is really looking at what are the additional things that you want to make sure you've got in your diet that are going to help you just keep your body healthy and functioning the way that it's supposed to. So we're going to go through fuel just a little bit more in depth. So when I say fuel, what do all of you think of, first of all, as far as what do you think is the main fuel source? Coffee. I heard it. Calories. Yeah, definitely calories. I heard someone say carbs. So think of fuel just like for your body, just like a race car needs fuel, right? You need to put in high quality stuff, right, high quality fuel to get high quality product out, right? Someone who's a professional race car driver, they're not just going up to the Chevron and filling up with the unleaded 87, right, before they have a big race. So kind of start to think of yourselves along the same lines. What you put in your bodies is really going to make an impact on how you're able to perform. And the other thing to keep in mind, someone said calories from a fueling standpoint. So when I talk about fuel, I'm really talking about the macronutrients. So protein, carbohydrate, and fat, those are all the macronutrients that provide your body with calories, right? On the other hand, we have micronutrients. Those are things that we need in smaller amounts, like vitamins and minerals, antioxidants, those sorts of things. We need them in smaller amounts. They don't give the body calories or energy in that sense of the word. So a lot of times you hear, oh, B vitamins, I need those for energy. That's a little bit misleading. B vitamins are really important in helping your body take fuel, right? Carbohydrate, fat, and protein, and turning it into a usable form of energy that the body can use, but they themselves don't give energy. So when I say the words fuel, energy, calories, all of those are going to really be used interchangeably, okay? And then just to make sure that we're all on the same page as we go forward, quiet in front row, please. Yeah, I know, right? So that we're all on the same page when it comes to what are carbohydrates, what are proteins, what are fats. I've just put a list up here. So your carbohydrates really is going to be your non-starchy vegetables, right? Like the carrots that are on here, the peppers, the tomatoes. Those still have a little bit of carbohydrate, but not as much in comparison to something like the sourdough bread or the potatoes or the rice. Those are going to have more carbohydrates per cup, essentially. So they're differentiated a little bit for you up there. Fruit also contains carbohydrate, right? Those are all your kind of plant-based sources of carbs. So I think of this in terms of when you go to the grocery store, the more carbs that you can get from things that are easily identifiable as a food source, right? This is an apple, this is a sweet potato, this is rice, I'm just going to boil it in some water, right? Those are the types of carbs to really gravitate towards rather than ones that come in boxes and plastic with an ingredients list a mile long of a lot of things that you can't pronounce. So that's why those are listed more towards the top. So you get your whole oats, your whole grains. And then as you get farther down, we've got breads and crackers, tortillas, things like that, pretzels, your snack foods, your sweets, your desserts. Not that those things can't be in your diet, right? But just as far as thinking of prioritizing, kind of work your way from the top down is really how we want to kind of do that with the carbohydrates. When it comes to fats, right, I've listed out plant-based and fat or animal-based sources, right? So on the top we have like your avocado, olives, nuts, seeds, oils that come from plants, and then things more like your butters and your cream cheese and your sour cream. Those are all going to come more from animal sources. So getting some from both animal and plant is important, but definitely making sure that you are getting those plant-based sources too, I know, is also going to be important for you. And then keep in mind too that a lot of those snack foods and things are going to also have added fats. So again, we're looking at choose more of those less processed sources of fat, whether they come from a plant or an animal, rather than your more processed ones that come in like your baked goods and all your snack foods and stuff. And then last on here, we've got protein, right? So again, you have your animal sources like your chicken, your beef, your pork. We also have dairy and eggs being a good source of protein. Something like Greek yogurt is going to be a much richer source of protein than, say, something like cheese, which is also going to have that fat in it. So it's going to be kind of both. And then plant sources of proteins. Any vegetarians in the audience today? Nobody today? Those are going to be like your beans, nuts, seeds. So last time I drew this on the whiteboard and I realized my limitations as an artist. So we're going to try it this way, which is a little bit better, I think. So those are the three main types of fuel that your body can use, right? So protein, carbohydrate, and fat. We do use all three of those as an energy source, but how we use them and when is really going to depend on what you're doing. So rather than thinking of these in terms of an on-off switch, think of them as more of a dimmer switch, right? One's going to be a little bit turned up more and another one's going to be lower, right? Protein's always just kind of on really dim because protein your body wants to use for tissue maintenance, tissue repair, more that structure. All of your lean tissue requires protein for maintenance and repair, not just your muscle. So it is really important and you want to make sure you have enough fat and carbohydrate, those calories coming from those macronutrients to make sure that protein can be utilized for those other functions, okay? So carbs in yellow. We're always burning a little bit of carbohydrate. It is, do you have a question?
What happens to the protein if you don't have enough fats and things that you just mentioned? It's kind of like you were saying that.
Right, so if let's say more of your calories are coming from protein than fat and carbohydrates, so only so much of that protein is going to be put towards that muscle building, tissue repair. So a lot of times people want to, like when they want to gain weight, they immediately start packing on the protein, but it can only go so far. And then essentially it's just going to be converted into an energy source. So it can eventually, it's harder to do, but protein can be converted and stored as fat if you have excess calories. If you're in calorie balance, it'll just be used as energy. Yep. But it's not as efficient as a source of energy as carbohydrate and fat. So from a training standpoint, you definitely want to have these two main fuel sources in adequate amounts. Excellent question. So you're always using a little bit of carbohydrate, even right now while we're all sitting here. Fat is definitely primarily what we're using right now, but carbohydrate is required to help our body burn fat. Okay, so something to keep in mind. But any kind of low effort, low intensity, anything that you're doing, whether it's what happened to the baby whisperer? She might want to go outside. Yeah, I think it's just because I'm here, and I can hold her too if I need to. But really, you know, anything that you're doing, like where you're not out of breath, you can easily carry on a conversation, right? So that includes probably part of your warm-up, your cool-down, maybe a lighter activity day, maybe something like yoga, right? You're burning primarily fat as your fuel source, a little bit of carbohydrate, and overall, just less calories, let's say in 30 minutes, right? When you move to that middle category, where you're kind of that more moderate level, let's say you're jogging, you're picking up the pace in your workout, you're going for a run, you're going for a bike ride, you're going for a swim, and maybe you're doing like a ruck of sorts, you're walking with weight or you're hiking. Those would all be examples kind of in that middle category there, that more moderate intensity. So you can still talk, but it's getting harder and harder to carry on a conversation. Maybe your sentences, you're speaking in shorter sentences, you have to catch your breath in between. That's kind of a good way to gauge your intensity level. In this case, you're really starting to use kind of a mix of carbohydrate and fat, okay? When you get to that far side, that really higher effort, higher intensity type of training, things like sprints or intervals or metcons, stuff you can't sustain indefinitely, right? You have to take a break and recover. That's where your carbohydrates are really going to come into play. So as far as being able to get energy quickly, carbohydrate still beats everything. So yes, you can use fat as a fuel source. Yes, you can use ketones as a fuel source. But as far as how quick it can get to your muscles and be used and turned into energy, carbohydrates always win. So when you're in that zone, carbohydrate can be a limiting factor if you don't have enough either stored in your body or that you've eaten around that workout. So if you stick to the other two zones primarily, it's not as crucial, right? When you're starting to mix in more of those types of workouts, that carbohydrate piece gets more and more important, okay? And we'll see kind of how that relates when we get to the next slide. Part of the reason for this, right, is if you think about it, we can only store about 2,000 to 3,000 calories worth of carbohydrate in our body. Fat, even like a super, super lean person, is still storing about 80,000 calories of fat, right? So being able to have that kind of readily available fuel supply is really kind of an evolutionary advantage, right? Because we can sustain those long duration but low intensity types of efforts for a long period of time because we have basically an indefinite supply. Once you pick up that intensity, right now that carbohydrate piece is a limiting factor potentially, okay? So that's kind of why it's important to adjust how you eat based on how you're training. So my next question for you is to think about how many minutes a day do you spend in each of these intensity zones. So you can just kind of throw out answers, but let's start with the high intensity. How many minutes per day would you say you do something along those lines? 20? 30? Kind of depends on the Metcon for that day or what you decide to do maybe outside of here. Usually a range I hear is about 15 to 30, just kind of depending on what type of training someone's doing. That can definitely vary. What about the middle one? Let's keep track of this too.
Could be the same roughly.
About the same?
Probably like 20 to 40.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more. So what does that leave for the resting?
3
about 23 hours in the day, right? So, and the reason I think that's important is you really have to kind of quantify what you're doing and kind of make it realistic to what you truly are. Because all of us in here, come in and we work really hard for an hour. And then we spend the rest of the day, if you have more of a desk-related job, you're just really not burning that many calories or using that many carbohydrates. So it's something that's important to consider into your overall kind of how to maintain your weight and how to fuel adequately, and also kind of when to know to dial it up a little bit, right? So I'm having trouble with. So these training plates correspond to each of those 3 kind of zones that we talked about, right? So if you're spending the majority of your day in that light activity, maybe you're injured or you're just taking a break for whatever reason, your wife just had a baby or anything like those kinds of reasons where it just derails your routine, right? If you can see, the green is produce, the red is protein, and the blue is carbohydrate. So the main thing you'll probably notice is that produce, particularly vegetables, we really want to up that proportion of our plate, and we're going to scale back on the carbohydrates. You just don't need as many when you're not training as hard, right? But what happens when you just try to restrict overall how much you eat?
You start eating more.
You get hungry, right? So, and then what's your body's natural response to hunger is to eat. Because hunger, it's just like when you have a signal that you have to go to the bathroom, right? It's a physiological, completely normal response. So sometimes you have to figure out ways to trick your body a little bit to deal with the fact that you're in an energy deficit. Your body does not like to be taking in less calories than it's burning. We're kind of designed to always be in homeostasis or in balance. So that's why it can be so difficult for people, right? So getting enough produce and vegetables in general, in particular, because they're high in fiber, they're high in water content, but they're low in calories, they can help us feel full, right? Your stomach's a sensory organ, so when it stretches, it sends signals to your brain that, hey, I'm getting fed, right? So that's just one kind of way that you can trick your body a little bit. Protein is also a really important nutrient when it comes to feeling full and satiety. So you want to make sure that that's going to stay about the same as it would be when you're training harder. Because usually when you're training harder, you're just eating more overall. So you'll just kind of naturally up your protein anyways. So the portion of your plate can really stay the same because you're probably taking in some extra snacks, maybe a little bit more pre and post workout, that sort of thing. Right? So you'll notice that the red stays relatively similar throughout the whole different training levels. Most people seem to fall into this middle category where they're mostly doing, and it kind of is highlighted here, they're mostly doing that moderate type of training. So really you're just going to divide your plate into even thirds, right? So you got a third protein, a third vegetable, a third carbohydrate. And oftentimes when I work with people more one-on-one, we maybe will do a mix of these plates. Like if they're one of your like 5 o'clock in the morning work, people that are training that early in the morning, maybe their breakfast meal is a little higher in the carbohydrate, and then we just kind of go down to the middle plate as the day goes on. So there's not like, oh, you only eat this way, you only eat this plate. We can often kind of use a mixture of the 3 to suit your needs and how you're feeling and how you're responding to training and other goals that you might have. The last one would really be in times of just heavy training, right? So that would be, you see the carbohydrate piece goes way up, the vegetables and the produce go down. You might use more fruits in this case. You might, because they're going to be a little bit more calorie dense, you might do more cooked vegetables, right? So you can cook down, 4 cups of spinach into about a half a cup, right? So you get all the nutrients that you need, but it's not taking up as much room on your plate. To give you a little bit more specific guidelines, your fist is a really good tool when it comes to how much to eat, right? So perfect, Bill put his fist up. We have very different sized fists. Would you say we have different sized bodies? Yeah, a little bit, right? So obviously me and Bill might be eating the same ratio of protein, carbohydrate, and produce, but the amounts are going to still differ just because he needs more calories than I do, even if the same exact training program, okay? So that's one. So you can kind of think about every quarter of the plate is about the size of your fist. So for that low one, that'd be 2 fists vegetables, about 1.5 fists protein, and then maybe half a fist of carbohydrate. The middle one would be about 1.5 fists of everything, and then the high one would be about 2 fists carbohydrate, 1.5 fists of protein. The remaining vegetables, and honestly, if you added some vegetables to that, it's not going to be a big deal, right? That's just kind of to visually kind of help you understand a little bit. What else is missing from these plates that we've talked about? Water, sure. We can talk about that a little bit. We've got protein, we have carbohydrate, fat. So fat doesn't get like a piece of the pie, right? Because usually fat's used more as a garnish. It's more calorie dense than carbohydrate and protein. Carbohydrate and protein have 4 calories per gram. Fat has 9, so almost double. And if you think about it, you're gonna put you put some cheese on your omelet, you put horseradish on your sandwich, you probably use a little something to cook these items, right? Like maybe an oil of sorts, or you put some avocado on something. So it's more of that topping. And again, depending on where you are, you can be a little bit more liberal with your fats when you're in that heavy training phase just to get extra calories. And you want to be a little bit more conservative. You still want to get fat with every meal. It's really important to help you absorb certain vitamins and minerals. So you always want to have some fat with your meals. It also helps with satiety and helping you feel full. But it's not necessarily going to get a place on the plate.
I have a question. I guess
Yes.
back to the last one with the tears. I should have
Oh, those were flames, but yes, they do look like tears. I should have explained that because they do look like tears.
So, because I was wondering how that relates to like if you're doing like high
Sure.
So because you're for that maybe half the time you're in the higher one, then half the time you're in the medium one, and so like if you're low on carbs, and I know the fat is harder to access, like how does that work?
Sure. It does. I understand your question. So you'd still want to think about it in terms of if you're doing an interval type of workout, and let's say it's 10 minutes, and 5 of those are that high intensity, that's still only going to be 5 minutes of the day that you're in that training zone. So overall, your overall intake would be that moderate plate. And that would be enough carbohydrate to fuel you for that workout. Now, if you had a weird day and you missed breakfast or you missed lunch or something like that before you went into workout, you would probably want to make sure that your snack maybe had more carbohydrate than normal if you missed out on that kind of overall plate guideline. Does that answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so like, I was kind of wondering if that was the type of workout I wanted to do, what type I would want to eat first. That I don't know.
Yeah, so if you think about, these are kind of your meals, and then you might also add in pre-workout, post-workout to kind of address some specifics like that. Okay, which I think, so a couple other things to keep in mind, which I think will also kind of help address your question, is that when it comes to fueling, it doesn't necessarily mean for everybody, but in general, eating every 3 to 4 hours, it should be kind of what you strive for. And that being said, your meals should keep you feeling satisfied for about 3 to 4 hours. Maybe breakfast, lunch, and dinner are 5 to 6 hours apart, and that's where like snacks and maybe post workout type of stuff comes into play. But if you're hungry after 2, you're probably not eating enough. If you're full after 4, you're probably eating too much. Okay, so just some other kind of little pieces that you can take away from this. Arriving to your workout well fueled and hydrated, and that's going to be kind of the ending of what we talk about today, is really thinking about how do we make this a plan that's going to work for you, right? Because your work schedule is different from Bill's, different than Lupe's, right? So there's no one size fits all approach. I definitely try to work with the individual whenever I work with somebody, because there are so many variables that you have to address. So these are just some kind of general guidelines. And then choosing a variety of food groups and then foods within those food groups is also going to be really important. We're going to get to that a little bit too. But you want to have that variety of foods so that you're getting the fuel sources that you need. Okay. Other questions on the fuel piece?
Actually, I think I have.
Yeah, of course.
I don't know if it's coming later on.
Yeah.
On timing and things.
Yeah.
But I'm a 5 a.m.
Yep. Good for you.
So at the same time, I work out on empty stomach. So
Okay.
like, what's a good?
So in that scenario, I would say you probably need something before bed.
Okay.
Because you're probably not going to get up even earlier to eat something and have it feel settled and good in your stomach. So that's a way to kind of address that.
So before bed.
Have like I'd have it be pretty balanced, like a protein and like a less processed carb. So like some berries with Greek yogurt and some nuts, or you could, if you like, eggs, you could do like some scrambled or hard-boiled eggs with some fruit, or you could do some oatmeal, but I'd still add some protein somehow, whether it's with like yogurt on the side or something like that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I don't know why it's changing all the formats. Okay. So recover is supposed to ask you the question of how empty is your tank, right? So think of this as kind of that after your workout. And so everything is really related, right? So the way that you recover is going to be directly related to how you fuel. So if you arrived to your workout well fueled, you ate 30 minutes before and you worked out for 45 minutes, how important do you think it is that you get that recovery within 30 minutes immediately after your workout? Like if you waited until dinner, which is an hour or so away, do you think that would be okay?
That's fine. You've had
Yeah.
a meal 30 minutes.
You're fine. You really are. Unless you're doing 2-a-days, really think of the recovery window as about 24 hours, right? So when you shorten that recovery time to 8 to 12, whatever it might be for somebody, that's where you really have to focus on that pre-workout, post-workout, and making sure you're optimizing all of those times. If you're just working out once a day and you have a full 24 hours to recover, it's not as crucial to get that post-workout recovery. And a lot of times what can happen for people is it ends up being a source of extra calories that they're not necessarily thinking about because they're like, oh, I've got to get my recovery in. It's like you will at dinner. If you follow those plate guidelines, you'll get your recovery in. Did you have a question, Jesse?
Yes, you keep referring to a pre-workout.
Mm-hmm.
What's a pre-workout window look like?
So that's also going to kind of depend on some things, but it will really depend on your ability to work out with food in your stomach. Everybody's a little bit different there. It's going to depend on the type of workout that you're doing. If it's a lighter jog, like a recovery type of jog or yoga, you're fine with your meals for the most part. If it's going to be something like you were talking about, like the interval training, like a HIIT workout, trying to get something that 30 to 60 minutes prior would be beneficial to make sure that your body has the carbohydrates to use in that workout. But again, you got to kind of take it in context of your entire fueling pattern. So on the flip side, right, getting back to the recovery, if you didn't fuel so well for your workout, maybe you had lunch at noon and then you went to work out at 3, you didn't have anything at 2, and you do a pretty good workout, definitely you're not going to want to delay your recovery any further, and you'll want to make sure you get something in as quick as you can after that workout. So that's why if you kind of think of fueling, like the pre-workout, ask yourself the question, how full is my tank right now, right? Am I 3/4 and above? Or am I kind of getting closer to that half full to quarter full? Or yeah, is that right? Yeah, quarter full. Versus on the flip side, when it's recovery, now you're asking yourself, okay, now how empty is my tank now that I'm done with my workout? Okay, so again, the components of recovery, a lot of people immediately think of protein, right? I think that's the most common. Like you see people with a protein shake. But depending on the type of training you're doing, you're also going to want to make sure you get carbohydrate in there. Someone mentioned water. Definitely hydration is a piece of recovery, making sure that you're getting enough fluids, you're getting enough electrolytes to help your body kind of absorb that fluid that you're taking in. So there's a lot of different pieces to recovery that maybe a future presentation we could get even a little bit more into the specifics of, but that's definitely the 3 kind of main things to think about with recovery is getting some protein to help with the muscle repair and rebuilding, carbohydrate to start refueling those stores that you've used up, and fluids to help you rehydrate. Okay, questions there? The last one, you can actually see this one, yay. It's protect. So this is thinking about now just if you take away the fact that you're training, right, these are foods that people should just be eating on a regular basis anyways. Your fruits and your vegetables, your plant-based fats, healthy fats help your body reduce inflammation, antioxidants to keep your cells healthy. The fact that you also train ups your needs for these types of things, right? So as great as it is for you, exercise is still a stressor on your body, right? So you want to make sure that you're putting in things that are going to help to combat that stress. So these are foods that really should be present in your meals and even as part of your like pre-workout and your recovery as often as possible. Pre-workout or post-workout doesn't have to be a supplement. And I think that's something that people kind of get really kind of tied to, is that it has to be a protein shake. No, it doesn't. It just needs to be a source of protein. And if it comes from foods that also, like I said, maybe something like yogurt and berries, right, where you're also going to get these antioxidants, you're going to get vitamins and minerals, you're going to get electrolytes to help you with recovery. The yogurt's going to be a source of fluid. You can really kind of start to think about how you can hit all these things if you don't just kind of narrow yourself to supplements at these time points. Supplements are convenient. That's the main reason that they're available to you. And I know last time I did this, we had Ascent protein here as an option because they're a third-party tested supplement, which is great. And I definitely understand that when it's the end of the day and you've been at work all day, the last thing you want to think about is, do I have my Greek yogurt and berries with me? When a protein shake is a lot easier. Okay, but so when we go back to looking at when you're planning out your meals, this is stuff not to neglect so what do you think? Look, I don't mean to pick on you, Jesse, thanks for volunteering. Breakfast, what are some things that we could add to make it, he's got the bell peppers and tomato, so we've got the produce piece, the colors, what are we missing? A little bit of carbs, yeah, you could do some fruit maybe on the side to double up on the antioxidants and get some carbohydrates. I'm also thinking maybe keep one of these and then sub out avocado for either cheese or bacon. So you've got, the plant-based fat in there as well, which is just more anti-inflammatory. Bacon, cheese, fine. But again, it's that balance, right? Lunch, definitely, adding in some veggies, maybe with some hummus as an easy kind of at work type of way to get produce and a healthy fat in. And then dinner time, I think you've done well with your dinner here. Again, maybe add in like an avocado, or if you're cooking the chicken in some sort of like a vegetable, like a olive oil or avocado oil or something like that. So that is all the stuff that you probably kind of already knew in some form or another. Like, I think generally people know, like, I could eat more fruits and vegetables. I probably need to be better about not skipping meals and making sure I'm getting things before I work out. The hard part for people is, how do we make this happen? And with the military, this is an area that I do work a lot with, because they're traveling a lot and they oftentimes don't have access to grocery stores and refrigeration. You former military or current military probably know exactly what I'm talking about. It's like, here, you're gonna go to this location and you're gonna stay in a hotel for 3 weeks. And you're like, what am I supposed to eat, right? So it's the same thing though, even when you are local and your life is just hectic and crazy, right? The same barriers can pop up. So I call it performance nutrition planning, right? And I looked at this because this is part of a brief that I give at my job, and I didn't even change any of the lingo because I think it still applies, right? So the first step is gonna be, what are your training and your fueling demands? So that is what you do here at CrossFit. It's what you do outside of here. It's if your job is a little bit more physically demanding than others. Are you chasing after kids all day long? There's so many things to kind of think about when it comes to your needs that makes you unique, that you have to identify. And then assess your environmental situation, right? So maybe at work you don't have a refrigerator where you can keep your lunch. So you have to kind of think about, okay, I need to buy a lunch pack and some ice packs so that I can keep things cold, so I don't just have to rely on what's non-perishable. So that would be an example of kind of assessing your environmental situation. Or maybe you have a job where you do travel a lot and you are staying in hotels often. And if you can at least, try to find hotels that have a microwave and a mini fridge, there's actually quite a bit that you can do in that situation. And then plan and prepare, and that's where this handout that Danny gave you all kind of comes into play. This is just my method of planning for meals. There's lots of, there's apps that can help you do this, but I like to have it where I'm planning out the meals and my shopping list at the same time. So a lot of people that I work with, it seems like they make the grocery shopping list. They do really great at going on Sunday. They get all the things that they think they need, and then they come home and they stare at their pantry and they don't know what to make for dinner. So I say, flip it around. What do you want to make for dinner? What do you want to make for your lunches? What do you want to take with you to work? What do you want to have as your pre-workout, your post-workout, your snacks to get you through that like 3-4 o'clock slump, right? Write it all down and then make your shopping list based on that. And come on, maybe. There we go. Oops. Because I know most people are not shopping just for themselves, right? How do you kind of expand it out to make sure you get enough for your entire family, right? So when you start thinking about things like even simple as eggs, if both of you are having 2 to 3 eggs per day, you're both all eating omelets, how many eggs is that, right? So you probably want to buy in the Costco size 5 dozen rather than going to the store every other day to get a dozen eggs, right? So really kind of sitting down and up front taking the time to do some of this. Probably the first 2 times you do it, it's going to take you a while and you're going to maybe get a little confused and you might make a couple mistakes and forget something. But the more that you do it, the more that you practice. Think of it just like learning some of the Olympic lifts here. The first time you did it, you probably felt really awkward and cumbersome and kind of like you didn't get it. And then after a few times, it started to click, right? It's the same thing. And I think that's what people don't realize or think about with nutrition is that it's okay to still make mistakes because you're learning. It's a process. It's not like tomorrow you need to be following all of these things, right? If you just start by picking your worst meal, whether it's you skip breakfast or lunch is really hard for you, always go out to eat, pick that meal and just work on that. And then you can kind of go from there until you get your full kind of week dialed in pretty well with, you know, the occasional Friday night going out to eat or those sorts of things. That's about all I have. The other side is a sample menu for you. Obviously, like I said, there's a lot of different ways. There's no one right approach. That's if anybody asks me like, what kind of diet do you promote? I kind of say it's nothing that's going to sell or make me millions because it's just eat whole foods, right? Like I said at the very beginning, when you go to the grocery store, foods that you can easily identify. If you evaluate all of those, I'll call them fad diets that are out there, that's the common denominator of all of them is that they cut out a lot of the like processed crap that comes in the center of the grocery store for the most part. When you can't read the ingredients, if you can't pronounce it or you have to sound it out, probably not something you want to include in your diet on a regular basis. So that's kind of my primary focus, and I think that that can meet a lot of people's preferences, whether you're vegan or paleo, right? You can still fall and fit into that criteria. So more whole foods based on your training demands and your goals is really the approach that I take when I work with people. So yeah, that about sums it up. If you have questions for me, I'm happy to answer.